Welcome to MMA Fancast. It is my honor to welcome a fairly well-accomplished high school and collegiate wrestler, James Lledo. James Lledo, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
It's great having you on the show. First time of, I hope, many more to come. We're having you on the show today because you are a month away, a little under a month away from making your MMA pro debut at the amateur level for 247 Fighting Championships Brawl in the Berg 12 at the Meadows Casino just outside of Cannonsburg, Pennsylvania. Very exciting. We're going to get to that, but let's start with the fact that you're high school wrestling at Lower Marion High School. You had 130 wins, 27 losses in your career, 76 pins, and your senior year, 38-4. Overall, that's a great high school wrestling career. What led you into wrestling in middle school? What was kind of the highs and lows of your whole high school pre-college wrestling career?
My older cousin was a very accomplished wrestler, and I always wanted to be like him when I was a little kid. And watching him wrestle, I wanted to do what he was doing. So that was why I started initially, and I fell in love with it the more that I did it. And, it is the sport of the highest highs and the lowest lows. And some of those lows were not finishing in the top 8 at our state tournament and having some unfinished business in my high school wrestling career. And that inspired me a lot to want to give it another chance in college and achieve my goals in that and bring it over to MMA.
Well, that brings us up. Thanks for your answer. And that brings us up to present tense. You're currently a University of Pennsylvania Panther on the wrestling team. You just finished your second year with them. You're going into your junior year. So what has it been like being a Division I, which is a dream for a lot of people? You know, a lot of wrestlers in high school just to compete at Division I collegiate level at all, any of the collegiate levels, D1 through D3. But to make it at D1, you're wrestling for Pitt. How has that been going for you? And kind of what's been the takeaways of the learning process for you wrestling against Division I opponents week in and week out?
It's been great. I'm surrounded by the best coaches in the country and the best teammates in the country, and they all push me to do better each and every day. And it's great to be in that environment where people want you to succeed, and they're all extremely supportive and help me to get to accomplishing the goals that I want to accomplish. And it's a dream come true, honestly. And I'm blessed to be where I am today.
It's always good to have support, not only in the wrestling room, but also in your family and friends outside of wrestling. You never want to become so myopically focused that you don't have support outside of what you're doing athletically. So it's great that you have all the support that you have. Now, I read that you were wrestling last year at both 174 and 184 pounds. What is it like wrestling at two different weights during the year? Do you start heavy and work lower, or do you just jump back and forth depending on what your coach wants?
Well, it was my decision to go down to 174 for a little bit. And it sucked. The dieting and the cutting weight, it wasn't that fun. And it did make me have a lot less fun. But it is part of the sport, unfortunately. But I do believe that 184 is a better weight for me. And my coaches understand, and they supported both of my decisions to go down to 174 for a little bit and go back up to 184 for next season and the seasons to come.
Okay. So it's good that you've made that decision that you're going to be 184 from here on out. That also answers the question that, yes, you plan on continuing to wrestle, for your next couple seasons at Pitt. So this brings us almost to July 9th. We're almost there. We're almost there. What made you start training? You've been training at Stout Pittsburgh, which is a great training camp. The Wilkins brothers are there. A lot of great talent. Mike Wilkins has fought for Bellator. He's fought for belts at CFFC and other regional promotions. Great guy. What took you into training MMA while you were still in your collegiate wrestling career?
I've always loved the sport of MMA, and I've since I was in middle school, I always was in and out of kickboxing and jiu-jitsu, and I never really like was super committed to it, but I would do it in and out for months at a time. But when I got up to Pittsburgh, I had a friend who had mutual interest in MMA, who's also fought under the same promotion, 247, and trains at the same gym. His name is Jeff Magan, and he introduced me to Mike Wilkins and to start consistently training up there and get good work in. And they told me that I could get a fight, and I told him I was totally about it. I really wanted to get in there and compete. I love to compete, and they've been super helpful, great coaches, and I'm excited to have them in my corner.
Wow, that is absolutely fantastic. I'm sure as a Division I wrestler, you do love to compete. I think in many ways, if it's possible, I know some wrestlers have been told by coaches not to until their wrestling career is over, but I think it's great to be doing both. You know, your MMA during the summer, kind of spring, and then wrestling, you can improve both. We've seen high-end wrestlers like DC Cormier out of UFC go from high-level Olympic wrestling right into MMA and obviously be successful there. So I think it works synergistically very well together, which is great. So I know there's a lot of positions that in wrestling you can't really be in. Like you can't be flat on your back in wrestling, but in jiu-jitsu you are not. Hopefully not a long time, but you can play off your back and throw up submissions. What was it like learning a sort of a defensive guard game and when you come from a wrestling background?
Well, a lot of the guys that I train with up at Stout can vouch for me when I say this. It is definitely a lot different being in on a single leg and having the possibility of getting choked out in a MMA fight than it is for a wrestling match. So that definitely took some getting used to, rolling around and having that possibility. But I mean, it is exciting to learn some new techniques and have that possibility where you know, I can't relax here, and it's exciting for me to learn that and be able to apply it in competition.
Indeed. And I think one of the things about a wrestler transitioning to MMA is you can pick up things very quickly. You're very aware of body position and those type things. Great wrestlers such as yourself are constantly critiquing sort of where their body is, even in action, like while they're still on the mat. So I think that's very good because you can kind of go through a checklist, a mental checklist. I'm sure your guillotine defense was practiced, which is always good. And there's a whole world in BJJ where guys love to welcome wrestlers because they know they're going to get some guillotines in while the wrestlers learning. So that's pretty exciting. What was your favorite submission to learn? I know a lot of wrestlers, you're already good at getting to submissions, but you can't finish them because there's certain rules. So what was your favorite submission that you're now like excited, like, wow, I can do this. This is legal.
I haven't learned too many, but it's definitely rear naked choke. I think that's like the best one. Like no debate. Like you got that guy beat and it's over. And yeah, that's definitely my favorite.
Yes. Well, it's one of the reasons why when I had a gym, I would always encourage wrestlers to recognize that the belly down defense in wrestling, where the person is then on your back and they have to kind of try to, you know, pull an arm and try to get you to turn and all that. They don't have to do that in MMA. They can just put the rear naked choke in and you're in trouble, you know? So obviously it makes sense to love the rear naked choke. I think that is a very significant weapon. Now, one thing that's interesting going from wrestling to MMA is the existence of walls, cages. And in wrestling, you know, somebody can sort of carry their momentum out of the circle and then it resets. What was it like, good or bad, learning that if you get in on a shot, you know, you can run them to the point where they stop. They can't just, you know, get out on you, and kind of what has the cage work been like for you?
It's been great. I definitely like to use the cage. It's a lot better for me and my style to be able to rely on that cage and not going out of balance like I would in a wrestling match. And I think that my wrestling and my fighting style is going to be very complementary with the cage. And I do see it being very successful and working out well for me with the way that I believe that I can fight and the way that I can wrestle. And I think it's going to work very well for me. Yeah.
What has it been like for these last 3 months? Because you are a thinker, you're a competitor, you've had hundreds of wrestling performances, not to mention thousands of training sessions. What's it like to kind of come up with a game plan? I mean, I know you're very new. You don't have a set game plan yet because this is your debut. You'll still be working on a game plan even at the pro level. But what I mean is, what's it like to start seeing pieces of the MMA puzzle, like the cage and like the style? Because I've been to enough wrestling matches to know that sometimes there's a certain style of wrestler that works better in MMA that doesn't always transition well to pure wrestling because of some of the rules in wrestling.
Yeah. Well, I do trust my coaches like Mike Wilkins and Will Morrow. I do trust the game plan that they're going to have for me. We haven't made too much yet, but I mean, I can imagine it's going to involve a lot of wrestling. But my dad wants me to stand and bang and use my hands because he wants me to put on a show. And regardless of whatever the plan is, I know that I am going to put on a show and I am going to perform, whether it's with my hands or with my wrestling. So I can promise that it's going to be a good fight.
Well, I always appreciate dads excited to see fireworks and your hands let loose. I think a big thing that wrestlers have as an advantage in MMA is knowing in a wrestling match, you have to take the opportunities presented to you. When wrestlers or MMA fighters get too dialed in on a certain move they like or a certain way of winning they like, they can become sort of stiff in their approach. And so I think MMA is a beautiful experience in your case of you might be able to bang and kind of get your dad excited there. I can promise your dad that if you stay in MMA long enough, there will be times where you will get into a firefight as far as the fists and the kickboxing goes. Sometimes you have to take the Bruce Lee approach and be like water and take the easiest route to whatever your opponent's giving you. You mentioned rear naked choke. You might get a rear naked choke in under a minute. You might get a knockout in under a minute, or you might go all 6 minutes. It really just kind of depends on what your opponent and what you're able to do. Another interesting thing is I've seen more and more, particularly in amateur MMA, fighters with wrestling experience kind of, yes, they can shoot for takedowns and push their opponent up against the cage and kind of keep working the takedown up against the cage and pick a leg and pick a heel and all that type of stuff, which is very good. But another thing I've seen sort of develop is the wrestler or the aggressive fighter sort of staying up tall and pressing their opponent with some clinch work up against the cage, almost like they're flat against the mat. And it's something I just wanted to ask you. Something I've seen about wrestlers is because you're so good at holding position and holding your opponent ideally against the mat, how much work and how exciting is it for you to have that element where you could hold? We saw DC do this a lot. He held taller, lankier guys up against the cage, and it still counted as him winning because it was aggression and it was control, but he didn't have them on the floor. Have you kind of developed sort of a pin against the cage method?
Well, not so much pin someone up against the cage, but I do like to get my takedowns going and taking it to the ground.
Sure.
So far in how I've been training, but I don't like to keep it on the wall. So I do like to get one thing that MMA's helped me with a ton is having a sense of urgency when I am in a good position and being able to finish that takedown that I'm in. Like when I'm in on a leg, not relaxing pretty much. And that has helped me a lot in my wrestling with that possibility of like getting choked out of nowhere, like that, how important it is to have that sense of urgency to finish. And I think that is going to be really helpful in my fight because I am going to want to finish every takedown really fast and take it to the ground.
That sense of urgency is really hard to deal with as an opponent. So I think it makes a lot of sense. And I appreciate you kind of saying what your style and what you want to do. What's exciting about wrestling and MMA is you get to dictate what happens in the cage. It's two fighters or two wrestlers trying to make their opponent do what they want them to do. So it's very exciting. You promised an exciting fight. How important is it for you to have sort of that big fan turnout? You're going to be, I would guess, somewhat local since you train and wrestle out of Pitt, and this is just outside of Pittsburgh at the Meadows. How excited are you to have your debut so close to a big fan base?
It's amazing. I mean, I can't even explain it. I got my whole family from Philly coming up, and I have about 25 people coming for me so far that I know of. And a couple of my teammates are coming up, and one of my old coaches for wrestling is coming up, and I have the best support group that I could ever ask for. And to know that they're coming up, I'd be disappointed in myself if I didn't put on a show for them. So,
well, I think you've already said that you want to put on a show. Do you have a certain prediction, or do you just kind of want to get in there and see what happens? What this is your opportunity to either make a prediction or give us sort of a tagline of why. I think your dad wants you to say you're going to knock him out. We don't need to make that type of prediction. What do you want to say?
I predict. I mean, I do get a little. I try not to do stuff like this with my wrestling, but yeah, I predict a knockout.
Well, at least that made your dad happy. It'll be exciting to see whatever happens. I think what's truly fun about MMA is you as a mixed martial artist now get to kind of, in a way, paint, show your creativity. You don't know what's going to happen. You might get that knockout. You might be able to, like you said, really show the sense of urgency in your takedowns. I did want to ask, I wanted to ask it earlier. I apologize for throwing it in late. This is a weight class that isn't technically a weight class in MMA. This is a catch weight. So it's between the official 185 and 205 weight categories. It's 195. Is that something that you kind of want to keep? You think 195 is going to be a place for you to kind of stay at for now? Or do you see 185 in the future once you get through your debut?
I definitely see 185 in the future, but to make this fight happen, it had to be at 195. And, my coaches, my wrestling coaches like it, but I know that my fighting coaches aren't too fond of it, fighting bigger guys. But, I can thank my dad for instilling on me that you got to fight the best, and no matter who's in your way, you got to take them out. And, he's definitely influenced me to seek out the best. And this was the opportunity ahead of me. And if it was at 195, I couldn't say no. So, I mean, whatever weight it was, I was going to say yes. And this was just what it happened to be. But I plan on being at 185 for a little bit. And but to make this fight happen, had to be at 195. So whatever weight, I'll say yes. But I do plan at 185.
Well, that's a very detailed answer. I appreciate that. I think something people don't always recognize, particularly from the wrestling background, if people are watching this because they're a wrestling fan, each and every match has to be agreed on by the commissioner, by the promotion, and by each fighter and each fight camp. And so that means that unlike when you're in Pitt, where if you were at the 84 or 74, you went into a dual meet, you went up against whoever they had at that weight class. It was already set. Nobody could say yes, nobody could say no. That's just what it is. In fighting, that's not the way it is. I know you had several opponents fall out. Your opponent had several opponents fall out. And so obviously a catch weight is to try to make the fight happen because both fighters kind of were looking for something else. I think it shows your competitive spirit. It shows the matchmaking at 247 trying to keep as many fighters on the card and exciting fights as they can. Now, you mentioned being from Philly, so I'm just going to plug that if people can't make the drive out, for those 25 or more that are coming out, obviously get the tickets from you. For those that can't make the drive out, keep in mind that 247fighting.com will have a live pay-per-view stream. And so that'll be a way for more people to kind of follow you and see what happens July 9th. It's been an honor having you on the show. It's always great to meet somebody new and fresh to MMA, particularly with your background and experience, being humble, listening to your coaches, knowing that there's a lot to kind of learn, training out of a fantastic gym like Stout. I think you're putting all the pieces together. Can't wait to see you in action. Thanks for taking time out of your day to come on the show. It's been an honor.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you, James. Have a good one. Can't wait to see what happens. July 9th, Braun the Berg 12, 247 Fighting Championships at the Meadows Casino. Have a good one.
You too.